Some fathers celebrate Father's Day by opening presents. I celebrated mine by pouring concrete. At 7:30 that morning, I stood at the end of my driveway holding a paintbrush. The final coat of bright blue safety paint slowly dried across a brand new wheelchair ramp. For the first time in 8 years, I could roll from my front door to the sidewalk without asking anyone for help. It wasn't just a ramp. It was freedom. I had paid for every inch of it myself. My name is Richard Holloway. I'm 71 years old. 8 years ago, a logging truck ignored a red light and crushed the driver's side of my pickup. I survived. My legs didn't. Doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. I agreed, but they never explained how a man was supposed to rebuild his dignity after learning he would never walk again. At first, I depended on everyone, neighbors, friends, even my daughter. Every trip outside required someone else's schedule, someone else's strength, someone else's patience. I hated it, not because people helped me, because I couldn't help myself. Everything changed the day my occupational therapist said something I'd never forgotten. Independence isn't measured by your legs. It's measured by how few times you have to ask for help. That sentence became my mission. Every dollar I saved after retirement had one purpose: to make my home mine again. The ramp took almost 3 years, not because it was difficult to build, because custom accessibility work wasn't cheap. Some months I saved $50, other months, nothing. But every pension check brought me one step closer. When the final handrail was installed, I cried, not out of sadness, out of relief. For the first time since the accident, I didn't feel trapped inside my own house. My custom wheelchair arrived 2 weeks later. It wasn't ordinary. The frame had been built specifically for my shoulders and spine. The seat supported my damaged back. The lightweight titanium wheels allowed me to push myself without destroying my wrists. Insurance covered only part of it. I paid the remaining $18,000 myself, worth every penny. That chair didn't just carry me, it gave me my life back. Father's Day felt like the perfect moment to show my family everything I'd worked for. Nothing extravagant, just lunch. Homemade hamburgers, fresh lemonade, my famous peach cobbler. I invited my daughter Melissa, her fiancé Trent, my younger brother Carl, 2 neighbors who had helped build the ramp, and my granddaughter, Sophie. She was 11, the only person who ever asked questions because she genuinely cared about the answers. The backyard filled with laughter before noon. Carl admired the new handrails. "You finally finished." I smiled proudly. 3 years, worth every blister. My neighbor Frank rolled my wheelchair down the ramp once, then back up, smooth as glass. It should last 30 years. Hearing those words made every sacrifice worthwhile. Melissa arrived nearly 40 minutes late. A brand new black luxury SUV pulled into the driveway. She climbed out wearing expensive sunglasses and carrying nothing. No Father's Day card, no gift, no hug. Trent stepped out from the passenger side. Designer polo shirt, car keys spinning around one finger. He looked toward the ramp before he even looked at me. "This is where all your money went." I smiled. "It bought me my independence." He laughed. "It bought you a sidewalk." Nobody else laughed. Melissa slowly walked around the ramp, examining it like a home inspector. She finally looked at me. "You actually spent thousands on this?" "Yes." Her expression tightened. "Dad, you could have just moved into assisted living." Carl immediately answered, "He doesn't need assisted living." Melissa shrugged. "He needs common sense." I quietly replied, "I need to live in my own home." She sighed dramatically. "You're wasting money on things you'll only use for a few more years." The backyard became silent. Even the birds seemed quieter. Before anyone could change the subject, Trent walked over to my wheelchair. He crouched beside it, tapped one of the titanium wheels with his knuckles. "This thing probably cost more than my first car." "It did," I answered honestly. He stood, shook his head. "I'll never understand spending that much on a chair." "It isn't a chair. It's how I get out of bed every morning." He smirked. "Still sounds overpriced." My granddaughter Sophie quietly walked over. She placed a handmade Father's Day card on my lap. "I made this at school." Inside she'd written, "Grandpa, your wheelchair doesn't make you strong. You make your wheelchair strong." I smiled, then hugged her. For one beautiful moment, everything else disappeared. The comments, the judgment, the tension. It was simply a grandfather and his granddaughter celebrating Father's Day. I wish the day had ended there. After lunch, Frank asked if he could see the garage workshop where I'd built most of the ramp. I rolled inside with him. Carl followed. We spent 20 minutes talking about tools, lumber, and old projects. When we came back outside, Melissa and Trent were standing alone near the driveway. They stopped talking the instant they saw me. Trent quickly slipped my spare garage remote into his pocket. He thought nobody noticed I did. But before I could ask why he had it, Melissa forced a smile. "Dad, why don't you show everyone how well your new ramp works?" She sounded unusually cheerful. Too cheerful. Something inside me suddenly felt wrong. I looked toward my wheelchair, still sitting exactly where I'd left it, parked at the bottom of the ramp, waiting for me. I had no idea that within the next few minutes, the very thing I'd spent years building would become the scene of the cruelest betrayal of my life. I rolled toward the bottom of the ramp. Frank stood beside me. Carl was still telling a story about the first wheelchair ramp we'd tried to build years earlier. The backyard slowly emptied as everyone wandered toward the driveway. Someone suggested taking a Father's Day family photograph. I smiled. "That sounds nice." I positioned my wheelchair near the flower bed. The sunlight was perfect. My granddaughter Sophie stood beside me holding my hand. For a brief moment, it looked like the kind of Father's Day every grandfather hopes for. Melissa looked around. Everyone nodded. Frank adjusted the camera tripod. Trent suddenly interrupted. "Wait, I forgot something." He walked toward Melissa's SUV. Nobody questioned it. He climbed into the passenger seat. Melissa slipped behind the steering wheel. I frowned. "Where are you two going?" She smiled through the windshield. "We're just moving the SUV. It'll look better in the picture." Frank glanced toward the driveway. "There's plenty of room already." Trent waved dismissively. "It'll only take a second." The engine started. The powerful SUV rumbled quietly. Melissa shifted into reverse, backed away from the driveway, then stopped. I watched through narrowed eyes. Something didn't feel right. Instead of parking she turned the steering wheel toward the side of the house, toward the new ramp, toward me. "What is she doing?" Nobody answered. The SUV rolled forward slowly, almost casually. Then, instead of stopping, the engine suddenly roared. The tires screamed against the concrete. The vehicle lunged forward, straight toward the bottom of my ramp. Frank shouted, "Richard!" He grabbed the handles of my wheelchair, pulled with all his strength. The chair rolled backward just as the SUV slammed into it. The crash sounded like metal exploding. Titanium twisted. Carbon fiber shattered. One wheel launched across the front yard. The armrest spun through the air before crashing into the mailbox. My custom wheelchair, the one I'd waited years to own, was crushed beneath nearly 3 tons of steel. Silence, absolute silence. Even the engine had stalled. Nobody moved. I stared at the wreckage. I couldn't process what I was seeing. It looked impossible, like someone had destroyed another man's life, not mine. Melissa slowly stepped out of the SUV. She didn't run toward me. She didn't ask whether I was all right. She looked down at the mangled wheelchair, then shrugged. "It was an accident." Frank turned toward her. "An accident? You drove straight into it!" She folded her arms. I hit the gas instead of the brake. Carl shook his head. "No, you accelerated. I saw it." Trent climbed out laughing, actually laughing. He walked around the crushed wheelchair as though examining a broken lawn chair. Then he looked directly at me. A wide grin spread across his face. "I guess that's one way to upgrade." Nobody reacted. He laughed again, then pointed at the twisted metal. "Have fun crawling inside, loser." The words echoed across the driveway. My granddaughter Sophie gasped. She looked at her mother, then back at me. Tears immediately filled her eyes. "Mom, why would you do that?" Melissa didn't answer. She simply kept staring at the destroyed wheelchair, almost annoyed that everyone else cared so much. I looked down at my legs, then at the broken chair. For the first time since my accident 8 years earlier, I had absolutely no way to move on my own. The chair wasn't damaged, it was destroyed. The frame had folded completely underneath the SUV. One wheel had snapped off. The seat was ripped apart. Even the custom control handles had been crushed flat. There was nothing left to repair. Frank quietly knelt beside the wreckage. He picked up one twisted piece of titanium. His hands trembled. "Richard, I'm so sorry." I smiled weakly. "It's not your fault." Inside, I felt something breaking that had nothing to do with metal. 3 years building the ramp. Years saving for the wheelchair. Thousands of hours rebuilding my independence. Gone, in less than 5 seconds. Then something unexpected happened. My neighbor across the street, Mrs. Alvarez, hurried over carrying her phone. She looked shaken. Melissa sighed dramatically. It was an accident. Mrs. Alvarez slowly shook her head. No, it wasn't. She turned her phone around. I've got the whole thing. Everyone looked confused. She pointed toward the small camera mounted beneath her porch roof. My security camera faces this side of the street. It recorded your driveway. Trent's smile disappeared. For the first time all afternoon, he looked nervous. Mrs. Alvarez continued. I haven't watched it yet. But if it recorded what I just saw with my own eyes, then nobody here gets to call this an accident. Melissa's face turned completely pale. Mrs. Alvarez didn't say another word. She simply walked back across the street, still holding her phone, still recording. Melissa finally found her voice. She's bluffing. Nobody answered. Trent forced a laugh. Security cameras never catch the angle you actually need. Carl looked directly at him. You sound awfully worried for someone claiming it was an accident. I couldn't take my eyes off what remained of my wheelchair. One of the custom hand rims I'd spent months choosing lay bent beneath the SUV. The small leather pouch attached to the armrest had burst open. My wallet, prescription glasses, house keys, everything was scattered across the driveway. It felt strangely symbolic. My independence wasn't just broken, it had been thrown across the pavement for everyone to see. Sophie quietly knelt beside me. She picked up my Father's Day card. The front had tire marks across it. She brushed away the dirt with her sleeve, then placed it back on my lap. I'm sorry, Grandpa. I gently squeezed her hand. You've got nothing to apologize for. Melissa watched the exchange. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she ask if I was hurt. Instead, she looked at her watch. Dade, I'll call the insurance company tomorrow. I slowly looked up at her. Insurance won't rebuild what you just destroyed. She rolled her eyes. It's only a wheelchair. Carl exploded. Only a wheelchair. That's his legs. You just crushed his legs for a second time. The entire driveway fell silent. A few minutes later, Mrs. Alvarez returned. This time, she wasn't alone. A police officer walked beside her. Apparently, she'd called the non-emergency line the moment she'd seen the crash. The officer introduced himself. I'm Officer Bennett. I understand there was a vehicle collision. Melissa immediately smiled. Wes, it was completely accidental. Officer Bennett nodded politely. I'll determine that after reviewing the evidence. Mrs. Alvarez handed him her phone. I've already saved the footage. He plugged it into a tablet in his patrol vehicle. Everyone stood quietly waiting. Even Trent stopped pretending to be amused. The video began playing. The officer watched without saying a word. Then he replayed it, again, a third time. Finally, he stepped away from the screen, looked directly at Melissa. Can you explain something? She nodded nervously. I accidentally hit the accelerator. He shook his head. The video shows your brake lights. She frowned. What? You stopped, looked directly at your father's wheelchair, paused for nearly 3 seconds, then turned the steering wheel toward it. He tapped the screen. And after that, you deliberately accelerated. Nobody spoke. Officer Bennett continued. That wasn't a driving mistake. That was a steering decision. Trent suddenly interrupted. You can't prove intent. Officer Bennett calmly looked at him. I don't have to. The video speaks for itself. Then, Alvarez quietly said, keep watching. Officer Bennett rewound the footage. This time, the security camera's microphone was turned on. Everyone heard Trent's voice clearly through the tablet speaker. Do it. Run over the chair. He'll never be able to leave this house again. The driveway became completely silent. Then laughter. Not from the guests, from the recording. Trent's laughter, immediately followed by his own words. Have fun crawling inside, loser. No one needed witnesses anymore. His own voice had become the evidence. Officer Bennett slowly lowered the tablet. He turned toward Trent. Place your hands behind your back. Trent's confidence vanished instantly. This is ridiculous. It was a joke. Officer Bennett didn't respond. He simply secured the handcuffs. Melissa stepped forward. Wait. It was my fault. Officer Bennett looked at her. The recording suggests both of you participated. She began crying. Real tears this time. Not because my wheelchair was gone, because consequences had finally arrived. As another officer photographed the destroyed wheelchair, a black pickup truck pulled into my driveway. Across the side were the words Freedom Mobility Solutions. The owner jumped out. His name was Jack Reynolds. He had personally built my custom wheelchair. He'd come to Father's Day because he'd promised to adjust the new suspension after lunch. Instead, he found his work crushed beneath an SUV. Jack slowly walked around the twisted frame. He didn't say a word for almost a minute. Then he looked at me. Richard, I kept every blueprint. I frowned. What? The chair? I built it by hand. I can build another. He looked toward Melissa. But first, someone needs to explain who's paying for this one. Melissa lowered her head. She couldn't answer. Because for the first time that day, she realized the wheelchair she'd destroyed wasn't just expensive, it was irreplaceable. Or so she thought. Officer Bennett didn't rush anyone. He simply separated people. One officer stayed with Trent. Another spoke quietly with Melissa. The rest of us remained near the shattered wheelchair. Jack Reynolds knelt beside the twisted frame. He ran his hand across the crushed titanium tubing, then quietly sighed. I've built custom chairs for 23 years. I've never seen one destroyed like this. He looked at the deep tire marks crossing the seat. This wasn't a collision, it was a target. Melissa finally walked toward me. Her makeup was streaked from crying. Dade, I'm sorry. I looked at her for a long moment, then quietly asked, which part? The wheelchair, the lies, or letting him convince you my life had no value? She couldn't answer, because the truth was, she wasn't apologizing for what she'd done. She was apologizing because she'd been caught. Officer Bennett returned holding a clipboard. Mr. Holloway, I need to ask one question. I nodded. How much did this wheelchair cost? $18,000 after insurance. Jack gently corrected me. Not anymore. Everyone looked at him. He opened a folder from his truck. The replacement price is now $26,400. Melissa's eyes widened. What? Jack calmly explained. The frame was custom welded. The seating system was custom molded. The electronics were individually calibrated. You don't buy another one. You build another one. And every measurement has to be repeated. Trent stared at the paperwork. For the first time all afternoon, he looked frightened. Officer Bennett wrote several notes, then looked at Melissa. Based on the evidence, you'll be receiving a citation for reckless driving on private property. He turned toward Trent. And because the recording captured you encouraging the act. That statement will become part of the investigative report. Neither of them argued. The video had removed every excuse. After the officers left, the driveway slowly emptied. Guests quietly hugged me before going home. Carl stayed behind. So did Frank. Jack refused to leave. He looked at the broken wheelchair one last time, then smiled. I've got an idea. What? I don't want to rebuild your chair. I want to improve it. I laughed softly. After today, I don't think I can afford improvements. Jack shook his head. You won't be paying. I frowned. What are you talking about? He pulled out his phone. I've already called 3 suppliers. They're donating parts. Frank smiled. I'll cover the labor. Carl folded his arms. I'll rebuild the ramp if it needs repairs. Mrs. Alvarez raised her hand. I'll organize the neighborhood, one by one. People began volunteering. An electrician, a welder, a physical therapist. Even Sophie smiled. I'll paint it. I looked around the driveway. Only an hour earlier, I thought my independence had been destroyed. Now, an entire community was helping rebuild it. 3 weeks later, Jack rolled a brand new wheelchair into my garage. It looked nothing like the old one. Stronger frame, lighter wheels, better suspension, custom blue accents matching my accessibility ramp. Across the backrest, he had stitched 4 small words, built with community. I ran my hand across the embroidery. Unable to speak, Melissa came by that afternoon alone. No Trent. She quietly stood beside the garage door. I ended the engagement. I nodded. He wasn't the only problem. She lowered her eyes. I became someone Mom would have been ashamed of. Silence filled the garage. Finally, she asked, do you think you'll ever forgive me? I looked at my new wheelchair, then at the people still tightening the final bolts around us. Forgiveness isn't something you ask for once. It's something you earn over time. She nodded. I understand. For the first time in years, I believe she actually did. Every Father's Day since then, my family gathers at the same house. We still barbecue. We still eat peach cobbler. Before anyone sits down, Sophie insists on one tradition. She rolls my wheelchair down the ramp herself, then smiles and says, "Ready, Grandpa?" I always answer the same way. I've been ready ever since people reminded me that the strongest wheels aren't made of titanium. They're made of the people who refuse to let you fall.